Hey everybody, welcome to Freethought in Florida. Freethought in Florida is a production of the Atheist community of Polk County. I'm Sarah Ray. I'm one of the directors of the ACPC. And we're going to be joined today by Miles McDude. Miles is the host of the As an Atheist podcast. So let's go ahead and, that's not a touch screen. Let's go ahead and bring you on, Miles. How you doing?
Hey, I'm well. I'm doing okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you. So,
all right.
So first, I don't think we've introduced you to this audience. You've been on my other show, so I hope you're well. How are you holding up in the, in the coronavirus pandemic world? And then just gonna go ahead and talk a little bit about you, however much you want to share your history and religion, whatnot.
Sure. I suspect I'm all right. I've had a cough for a while now. I don't think it's COVID-19. So if you hear me coughing and gagging back here, it's more of an ongoing thing. I don't know. The doctors looked at me. We don't know what it is. Probably allergies. Standard Florida stuff. I was a Christian for a lot longer than I think reason dictates. And at some point, it no longer made sense. I was raised Pentecostal, which was like snake handling without the snakes. And so I'm extra angry about religion. If you listen to my podcast, which I don't recommend anyone do, it's a lot of it's just me venting about my past, and the implications for the present, man. A lot of this stuff is just, it's if you know the context, if you know where this theocracy comes from, you should be freaked out and pissed off. And that's what my show's about. Is like, oh my God, I know what's coming. I know what they're doing. So anyway. I guess that's the short version of it.
Well, and I will recommend that people check out your podcast. I started listening to that early on. Well, and what I will say is, what I think is most interesting is that, so we often talk about, people who come out of religion tend to go through some variation of an angry atheist phase, right? Where you feel a number of different things. You feel like everybody you've ever loved lied to you, and the wool was pulled over your eyes, and how could these people be so blind? And then you learn how it infects our politics and everything else in the world, and you're just pissed, and you don't know what to do with that. And so what I like about your podcast is that we're getting to watch someone really kind of work through all of those feelings and work through that angry atheist phase of how do I allow myself to feel this stuff, because it's valid. And, and I'm pissed, but also knowing that there's a maybe not an end point, but that I'm working towards something that's more positive and more productive, but I got to get through this stuff first. And I think putting that out there and being raw and transparent, I think is a great thing for other people who are going through it or who will go through it to be able to look back at and see it happen.
Cool. Yeah, I'm looking at some of the older shows, and I was so pissed off in the beginning that it's really kind of cringeworthy. But my mother and my wife, and cherish them both. They're wonderful. I love them. They're both Christians, and that may never change. And that's something that I'm having to kind of come to grips with. We have arguments that affect my kids. I have three boys, and so we have to figure out how to live in this situation where we respect each other. We don't trample each other's worldview. So it's interesting, negotiating that. My wife, I ask her all the time, I'm like, why do you put up with this? I mean, I believe in tells you not to, tells you to do what I say. And what I tell you to do is to not go to church, so, and it might be fun to have her on the show sometime if she's into it.
Yeah.
For her to give you her 2 cents on why I'm nuts. I don't know.
Well, I think there's a great conversation there too in, when you have people who reach out and say, hey, I'm going through a thing, I need some help, right? One of those things in this community is, hey, my partner is a believer of some variation. Can you make that work? Is that a thing that, how does that function I've now decided that, maybe we started out as we were both religious together, and we went to church together, and we believed the same things together. And now, man, people grow and change and drift. Yeah. And that's just a reality. And so when one of a partner pair loses that belief, how does that affect the relationship? How do you keep it going and still be respectful of each other and all of that stuff because you love the person, right? Like that's the thing that doesn't change. Like but I have feel some kind of way about the things that you believe now. And so we
Yeah.
have to figure out how to make that work. I think that's the conversation to have. I think that would be cool to see how you guys make that function.
An interesting aspect of that, and a bit of a rabbit trail here, but with the kids, it's kind of disrespectful for me to tell the kids, hey, there's no God. And I realized that kind of early on. If they ask me, and I did the same thing with Santa Claus, by the way. They're like, Dad, is there a Santa Claus? I said, nope, absolutely not. As your father, I'm supposed to tell you the truth. There's no Santa. And my oldest, he goes, well, Dad, I've seen him, and that was it. And then we put out the milk, and he ate the cookies and the whole thing.
Yep.
But what I've found is they get thousands of hours of indoctrination, and all I did was maybe 10 hours. I'd take them aside for maybe an hour, every couple of months, and just do a bit on critical thinking. Like I didn't even have to go, hey, there's no God. I just had to do a hey, demand evidence speech. Yeah. And none of them believe now. My mom's kind of pissed about it. I'm like, but Mama, what do you want me to tell them? That Exodus 21 is the way they should govern their lives. Are you shitting me?
Right.
So
yeah. I like that. It's we'll come back to that at the end a little bit as we kind of talk about Easter, but that the idea of teaching, critical thinking and skepticism. I also like the Matt Dillahunty approach, which is, hey, will you let me read stories from the Bible to your kids, and I get to pick the story?
I get to pick them. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, if they actually do what the church tells them to do, read the Bible, that's the way out.
Yeah,
it actually is. But I still love my wife, still love my mother, and they still endure me. I think they like me,
Yep.
It's been interesting. I'll tell you, one of the most valuable things that we can do, I think, is what you and I are doing right now. We're simply existing in this space because it's in our area. It's so rare to have someone stand up and go, hey, this is all bullshit. Our sheriff goes to church in his gear. Like everybody believes this, but like 6 of us. So it's really valuable. We haven't ended up in a phosphate pit, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But it's good to stand up and exist right now as an atheist.
Yeah,
in the
absolutely. South. I do want to take care of a little bit of business before we go on. We're having a good time and a good laugh, but I want to talk today a little bit about coronavirus and how, the communities of faith are, handling that and dealing with that. But a bit of a somber moment off the top here. I do want to I want to pass on our sympathies from the atheist community of Polk County to our friends over at Suncoast Skeptics in Sarasota. We found out last night that they one of their friends, one of their members, Ned, passed away as a result of COVID-19, and that's just some shit to have to deal with. And a loss like that in normal times is hard enough, and so I can't imagine like not being able to get together and grieve and mourn together and support each other. And he was, I believe, survived by his wife. And so her having to go through this time of, not being able to get together with people and hug it out. And it really makes me feel some kind of way. And I just, from the organization, we wanted to, to say to Ned's wife and friends and family, we love you and we're hurting with you, and that it just really sucks, and we wish we could do more. So let's let that sort of lead us into a conversation about the way communities of faith are handling this. So we are following the science and doing what's recommended. We have counties now who are coming out and saying, if you're going to be out in public, Osceola County said now you have to wear a mask if you're going to be out in public. I know there are a couple of others. I think Hillsborough is considering it, and Orange. And so, we listen to Dr. Fauci, and we listen to the experts and the body of science and knowledge that is bringing to bear, how to best handle this. And we're trying to follow the distancing guidelines and stay-at-home orders and all of this stuff because we value the expertise of the people who are out there on the front lines dealing with this and learning about it. Meanwhile, we have some organizations who are, turning to God at this time, and I think there's a contrast to be drawn there. So I want to start with there's a story So here in Florida, just the backstory. Here in Florida, we sort of followed the Trump approach, which was sit on our hands for a long time and not really make a decision until we absolutely had to. And funny story, I've recently learned that someone in my circle who is, how do I say it without saying too much? Someone who's in the position of making decisions for an organization, just believed that we're all overreacting and this is just a fake thing and that the flu is worse, and so they sat on their hands and didn't make a decision, and so that's sort of what we're seeing come through the communities of people who tend to not value skepticism, and our governor Ron DeSantis it fits squarely into that box. So we sat on it and we sat on it and we sat it and waited and waited and waited and left it up to local communities. So you had various counties and city level governments making the decision to issue stay-at-home orders or various guidelines, curfews, that sort of thing. And so in Tampa, there had been a stay-at-home order issued that did not exempt religious gatherings, religious organizations, right? So this is the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office had an anonymous tip that this pastor is a megachurch pastor, Rodney Howard Brown, at the River at Tampa Bay Church, that he was going to hold church services, and despite the Hillsborough County stay-at-home order. So the sheriff's office arrested him, right, for, let me see if I can find it. It was endangering the public or something like that. I don't remember what the exact charges were. They're here in the story. I'm reading out of the Tampa Bay Times. Reckless disregard of public safety and repeated requests and warnings. So he turned himself in, I assume under the advice of the church attorney, because that's the smart thing to do when it comes to sentencing. Were you cooperative? And so now there's this conversation about, so he was arrested, in jail for 40 minutes, roughly, and then bonded out on $500 bail. So yet to be seen if that was something enough to teach a lesson. But then what happened was, then the state of Florida issued its stay-at-home order after all of this had happened. And the Florida stay-at-home order includes an exemption for religious institutions, that churches can get together and have church service. So there was some question about legally, is it retroactive? How does that affect? Is he off the hook now because the state order exempts religious institutions? And from what I understand from following the legal advice of First Amendment attorneys, that no, because the Florida order was not retroactive, it applies from the date of implementation going forward. So he still has this on his record. He was still arrested. He was still jailed, and that's still a thing. But now we're in a state where, in the state of Florida, churches can, pack the house and have church services on Sunday, and there's a serious public safety concern about that. I don't know. Have you been following this? What do you think?
Oh yeah, I can't help but going right for what I consider the heart of this subject is, you have these pastors like this pastor in Virginia who, stand up and go, look, for the glory of God, we're going to make sure that everyone knows that God can heal this by assembling in the middle of this pandemic. And they get together. That's not literally what he said, but that's my, take on it. They get together and then they spread the virus. The pastor died.
Yep.
Right. So we're at a point now where, I'm trying to find polite ways to say, look, the chicken bone shaking voodoo does not work.
Yep.
It does not work. It's clear that your God's imaginary and may kill us all. Your faith may kill us all. I was saying this before the pandemic. I said, look, man, believing, ostensibly bullshit is going to kill us all, end us as a species. So not very popular with my wife and my mother, but it's true.
Yeah.
And now we have evidence. So if anybody wondered, yes, faith can end us as a species. Believing bullshit can end us as a species. We have evidence. We can stand on it. You can see it. So, it's hard for me to kind of like, I wanted to get off of that talking point. I really did. Like, hey man, quit saying shit like faith is going to end us as a species, Miles. Calm down. But it's true. You can see it.
Well,
and so I have to have, why the hell can't you see this conversations, which is terrible.
Well, that's so the thing that ties off of that, and we're going to come to this in a minute. We often hear from believers, why can't you just keep your atheism to yourself and let people believe whatever they want? It's not hurting anyone. It is.
Faith is hurting people.
It is. Yeah. So, often we talk about, we kind of counter that with like, right, but you're a victim of bad ideas, and those bad ideas, if you're believing things for reasons that are not warranted, and you're using bad epistemology to come to truth claims, to true beliefs, you're going to take that and use that in other aspects of your life, and you're going to vote that way, and you're going to, all of the things that you do, and that's going to affect us. That's going to affect everyone. But here's a very direct, like, here's what this guy in Virginia said. I happen to have that. This is from the New York Post. Bishop Gerald O. Glynn, he says, I firmly believe that God is larger than this dreaded virus. You can quote me on that, he said, repeating it a second time to Claps, saying that people are healed in this church. And this is the guy who, Richmond's New Deliverance Evangelistic Church, which is an interesting way to use the evangelical word, that passed from COVID-19. And here's a person who says, God is stronger than this virus. We can come together because God will protect us. We won't get it, but you will. And even if you didn't, like, you're putting everyone else in a position of risk. It would be one thing. And I, as someone who has to try to, fake being a community leader,
that's not true. You're doing a good job. But you have to put a lid on the rage, man.
You're right. You're right. But like, there are people who come in and go, well, good riddance, or I'm glad they're going to get, I hope they all get it. And I understand where that comes from. But first of all, there's a humanist element of that, which says that we're more alike than we are different. And I still have to care about these people because they're people, and in spite of our differences. And also, those people are going to leave church on Sunday, and they're going to go to the grocery store. They're going to drive through, McDonald's and pick up whatever. And that's how the virus spreads. They're going to take it into the grocery store where our friend Keith works, and put more and more people at risk. And so it frustrates the hell out of me that so many states, and generally states in the South, have exempted religious gatherings in these stay-at-home orders.
Yeah. I think, I've been trying to get down to the core of this rage, this anger. And I think I found it. I mean, it's very much a George Carlin principle, in that if you look at a really pissed off, liberal, it's because he's a disappointed idealist. I know I'm phrasing that poorly, but I love these people. I do. I love you, Christians. If you're listening, I love you. I care about you. And that's why I'm so pissed off that you're willing to die for an imaginary friend. And there's this phase of atheism that you go through that's, I think it's the longest phase. It's before you get to the angry atheist part. And it's, God's real, but everybody's wrong about it.
Yes.
Like the Bible has to be wrong because clearly it is, but God's still there somewhere. And that phase can last for years. It can last the rest of your life, but once you get right through that, there's going to be this anger. And at the core of that is your love of people and this disappointment that we've been lied to. And now it's clear that those lies are harmful to us as a species, harmful to our children, harmful to our neighbors, harmful to people who will never, ever, ever recant and protect themselves. Like that's the hardest thing to process, is I'm trying to tell you to be careful, to save yourself. And instead you're telling me that your imaginary friend wants you to go and endanger yourself so that you can give a church money. Yeah. It just, it's painful.
Yeah. It's frustrating.
Like,
So
All right,
there's
let's get
another
back off the soapbox.
there's another component to this before you get too calmed down. When we're talking about the way these beliefs interact with the rest of us and the rest of the world and impact our lives. So one of the things that sort of came out of this stay-at-home order thing is a broad question about how much can the government limit your right to your freedom of religious expression, your freedom of religion. It's funny because we have conversations about, we're gonna get to this coming up. There's lawmakers who are using their social media to promote religion, and the responses that you get back include, well, he has a freedom of speech, right? That's the First Amendment. He's the freedom of speech. He can say whatever he wants on his Facebook. No, so our freedoms are limited. We all of them are limited. It's the same thing with the people who are, the Second Amendment allows me to own as many guns as I want and do whatever I want with them. And no, all of our freedoms have limits to them, and the freedom of religion is no different. And so when we're looking at, can a state order
where mine begin? Yeah,
right? Can a state order that is about the public health situation supersede your rights? The answer is yes. Now, the question is, where is that line and how blurry does it get? But the answer is yes. The state can come in and say, hey, listen, this is a community health issue, and so you can't go to church. We're not saying you can't believe. We're not saying you can't talk about Jesus. You can't preach. You can go online, and many churches have, and I want to be clear about that. When we talk about these churches that are getting together on Sunday, it is a small percentage of the total. And most churches have done the right thing and have packed up their stuff and gone online. And thank you for doing that from the rest of us to be healthy. We appreciate that. So
I still don't understand why they don't see that the holy water doesn't work, though. That's still like you had to take the holy water out of church because God's not in it.
Yeah,
come on.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting one of those things too. That's like, well, okay, well, if we can pray at home and have the same impact as it would be praying in church, why are we getting together at church again? And it's the community thing.
A conversation about God creating the virus.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they're like, he's in control of everything. I'm like, then he made that virus or let it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Why haven't we had that conversation? Like, hey, why is your God killing us? Yeah. Like that seems like a perfectly reasonable question. I love you, but why is your God killing us?
Right. So the other way that this sort of entangles is with this new tax relief or economic relief legislation. This is from NPR. A key part of the $2 trillion economic relief legislation enacted last month includes about $350 billion for the Small Business Administration to extend loans to small businesses facing difficulties as a result of the coronavirus shutdown orders. Churches and other faith-based organizations are among the businesses that qualify for aid under the program, even if they have an exclusively religious orientation. Quote, faith-based organizations are eligible to receive SBA loans regardless of whether they provide secular social services, the SBA said in a statement. No otherwise eligible organization will be disqualified from receiving a loan because of the religious nature, religious identity, or religious speech of the organization, end quote. The SBA statement on the participation of faith-based organizations in the new loan program declares that some agency regulations, quote, impermissibly exclude some religious entities. Because those regulations bar the participation of a class of potential recipients based solely on their religious status, SBA will decline to enforce those subsections and will propose amendments to conform those regulations to the Constitution. So here we have a stimulus program that's designed to help small businesses get through this, weather this storm, so that they don't have to shutter their doors and they can, when we all go back to normal, which we're not, and that's a conversation for later, the mom and pop shop hasn't shut down, and yet churches apply.
I'd be fine with this, believe it or not. This is not going to be popular, but as long as they have to pay taxes after they get that money, sure. From now on, you pay taxes.
Right.
But I also heard in there only Christians. Like if you listen real close in legalese, they're like, well, we can make exclusions to certain religions is what it sounds like. Otherwise, if that's not the case, I hope Lucian Greaves and his team are there with wheelbarrows.
Yep.
If they show up to those meetings with empty wheelbarrows, or an empty treasure chest, fill it up.
Well, that's the question, right? Are these churches? Are we classifying them as businesses? Are we classifying them as religious nonprofits? Like where are they in this bucket? And and the question here, which is I think concerning, is here you have money from the Treasury, directly or indirectly, but directly, going toward a religious purpose. And many of our state constitutions, including Florida, still have a Blaine Amendment. And there's, we can do a whole show on the Blaine Amendment, but essentially the idea is that we don't have religion in schools. And then that extends out further from that point, which is that no money from the Treasury shall go in aid, it's called a no aid clause, to a religious organization. And yet we've been seeing, the Trinity Lutheran case about Trinity Lutheran has a daycare that's not exclusively for religious purposes, but it's part of the church. It's part of the church's daycare, which is part of their mission. And they wanted to resurface their playground with the recycled tire stuff. And so they applied for a program offered by the local governing authority, and they were turned away because they were a religious organization, and you can't apply for that. And they won. And so now we're starting to see, businesses are people, my friend, but also so are churches, and churches are businesses and people, and it's getting muddier.
That's the stipulation we need to make. I think that's the clarity we can add. We need to rally together and say, okay, you can have that money, but now you're a business. Mm-hmm. Now you pay taxes. You've declared that you are a legal business entity by, taking this money, which means you're no longer a religious institution that's exempt from taxes. So you can take this money now, but you're going to pay taxes henceforth. Yep. So sure, you can have a political stance. You can tell people who to vote for, but you're a business now. You're paying taxes.
Yeah.
Maybe that's how we should push on that, is not to try to end it. Because these pastors, obviously, a lot of these churches, when we think of churches, we think of mega churches with tons and tons of resources for free that are non-taxed, right? But coming up in Florida in all these smaller churches, I can see where they'd need money to get by. But I think, how they preached to me when I was a kid, where they told me how to vote. I think it's about time that they be responsible for those messages. Where if you're going to interact as a business entity in the community, they have franchises now. Yeah. Franchises, like it's time for them to pay taxes on that money.
Yep.
So I was in a church, charismatic church that my wife started going to after we left the Pentecostal church. And I've been an atheist for years at this point. But there was a point where I could no longer do Pentecostal. My wife and I had a conversation. So she went to we agreed to go to another church, and I went with her for a while. And the church was, it was kind of nice. I mean, it was fairly mellow, even from an atheist standpoint. They were kind of laid back, but they were bragging about giving $1 million to the community. And I thought, could you imagine the good you'd do if you paid taxes? You gave $1 million and it didn't affect you at all. Like that's the thing we need to talk about. Yes, if you're going to take this money from the government, yes, you operate like a small business. Yes, you should probably, the pastor should be able to eat, because we love the pastor. We love Christians, right? We just don't like what they believe, right? But you're now paying taxes. From now on, you're a business. The end. Yeah. I think that's the way we should push this.
Well, it's interesting because as a nonprofit, we have to play by most of the same rules as a religious organization. Not quite all of them, but most of them. And yet we don't really pass the plate like the church does. I don't expect that the members of the ACPC are, 10% of your income or whatever. Like it's not expected. In fact, at times like this, we're looking at our folks and saying, like, we're good because we don't have a bunch of programs right now that cost money that we have to deliver on yet, because we're still only a year old. And we'll get there, but our members are hurting. And the limited funds that we have now, we're using to. Do you need cleaning supplies? We'll go get you cleaning supplies. I'll drop them off at your door. No big deal. Just let me know. Just tell us, and we'll, whatever it is that you need right now. Do you need food? We'll get you food. And that's the sort of thing that we want to be able to do. But we don't pass the plate every week, and so we have to make. This is my camera. If you'd like to support the atheist community of Polk County, go to polkatheists.org and hit the donate button, so that we can help our members. But we don't have that systemic influx from the congregation, so to speak, that churches do. And so in times like this, does any nonprofit qualify for this? Or, how are we specifically describing, what a business is in terms of this? And on a side note, I think when I think about taxing nonprofits, religious or non, I've always sort of come down to the intent, right? So the intention was, we're going to make you a tax-exempt organization because you provide a valuable service to the community. And so I think that needs to be more clearly defined as to what a valuable service is. And then there needs to be a way to filter that, right? So if I'm operating a church or an atheist nonprofit, and I want to get that tax exemption, I should have to make a clear statement to the government, to the taxing agency, this is the community service that I'm providing. And it's not just we get together and have community, right? It's I'm providing a program for people experiencing homelessness. We run a program where we provide, masks. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, to people on the front lines, that kind of stuff. You have to show that you're doing something in the community, not just getting together every week and proselytizing. And I think, I don't know, maybe that's, rather than just tax them all, maybe there's a more nuanced way to do it, because my fear would be, if we just start taxing churches, then what is the distinction between what we do and what a church does, if that makes any sense?
Sure. Yeah, well, I think as the distinction diminishes, as they become more business entity, like maybe we should have an evangelist. Like I volunteer for that. I will evangelize and pass around the plate. We need money because we're trying to escape our fate. We've decided the human species can no longer exist in every way imaginable. In order to fight that, we need money. Send your money now. So, come to the Church of Smokey's Church of Awesome. There you go. I don't know. I have that on Facebook, by the way. Our one tenet is don't nobody hurt nobody, and then you put up a song. And that's it. That's the whole service.
There you go. So let's move on then out of the church tax exemption conversation with the stimulus money. I want to talk a little bit about the public officials using social media to proselytize or promote religion. And maybe the introductory statement here is, first of all, people need to learn the difference between a Facebook profile and a Facebook page. There are several different functions that Facebook does, and I'm going to try not to, speak with a tone, because this is really frustrating.
Yeah.
As a Gen Xer who launched the internet. It frustrates the hell out of me that people don't understand these things. When you sign up for a Facebook profile and people can add you as a friend, that is your private profile. You can limit who sees what on it. That's your personal space, right? And you're inviting people into your home. When you have a Facebook page, and the atheist community of Polk County has a Facebook page, that can be a business. It can be a podcast. It can be the lawmakers have Facebook pages, organizations, that sort of thing. And those are public. And when those are used by people who are elected to represent us, for people who are government employees, that becomes a function of their position in the government. So that becomes an extension of government speech. Then you have Facebook groups, which can be made private or public or hidden, that people can join and like-minded. We have one of those too, for people in the area to get together and chat. And that's more like a message board or discussion group. But it's that page that's the one that confuses people. And so on Sunday, we celebrated Zombie Jesus Day. And
he's a lich.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know, springtime and the renewal of the land and the leaves come back from trees that look like they're dead and back from the dead. Anyway, so all of our officials tend, first of all of the state level officials for our areas that represent various parts of Polk County are all Republican. It's just that's a fact. And many of them used their Facebook at that moment to, do a little proselytizing or promotion of Easter. And so I want to draw a circle around some of those. But just, the intro there was to say that's a conversation that I had to get into with people in the comments, because they were like, well, this is Kelly Stargell's Facebook. She can say and do whatever she wants. But that's not true. Kelly Stargell can go on Kelly Stargell's private Facebook and say whatever she wants on her profile, where she can add you as a friend or remove you. But on her page as Senator Kelly Stargell, she cannot. If she does, this is with limits. If she does, then she also has to post about Ramadan. If you're going to post, hey, we're here, we're going to celebrate this religious holiday. If you do the Christian ones, you have to do the Jewish ones and all of the other ones, And so some of the things I got into in the comments also were, if you don't like it, just scroll on by. Okay, fine. Well, when we start talking about Allah, when one of your legislators starts posting about Allah, I hope you will have that same scroll on by approach.
So do you want some contrast here? Because I actually kind of have a counterpoint to this.
Sure.
Okay, so when Grady Judd, long time ago, he went to church, spoke at church in his uniform, and he's our sheriff here. There were atheists who were pissed, and rightly so. And I will begin this with, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Yep.
Okay. But one thing I'm digging about the internet, and I'm probably going to be harmed by this at some point, but we get to see who you really are. You get to see who I really am. If you're going to look for Miles McDude, which I have not hidden my name very well. My name actually is Miles. You could probably find my last name. I told you I live in Lakeland. You found me, white supremacist. The end. But seriously, I mean, you'll know who I really am. And if you find my Atheist podcast, you'll find out what I really think. I feel like that's valuable. I don't feel like it's something that we should prevent. And I think if our public servants are up there going, look, I believe in Jeebus this, Jeebus that, then I get to authentically respond. I get to authentically say to our representative, hey, your God made the virus if he's real. No one in their circle may tell them that. There's no one in their circle that may ask them that question, that may pose that that conundrum, man. So I don't know. I'm torn because I feel like you're right. Like if you're representing the state in your public and private social media, you should represent all of us. But I think you should represent us as who you are. And if we disagree with who you are, then we move you out.
Yeah.
And us disagreeing with who they are is my central argument in fighting faith instead of fighting, these individual teams, these football teams that we have now for politicians. If we can do away with faith, then we no longer elect bullshitters, and that's on the left and the right. That's the essential problem, is talking to our moms in my specific situation. By the way, I wrestled my mother away from Trump. He could not have my mother. Fuck that. I made a tent in the yard and I'm like, I will fight until I rip that motherfucker out your head. You cannot have my mother. Anyway, sorry. But, when it comes to these people that we know, these people that we love, and we're not even talking them out of their gods. We're just saying, hey, don't believe things without evidence. That ripples all the way up to who we elect. That's who we become as a species, is beginning right now. You and I just existing in this space and trying to talk people into evidence.
Yeah.
So I don't mind Kelly Stargell going up there and saying he is risen.
I see
when
the
I could
value.
go, hey, can we prove he exists?
Yeah. I see the value in that. I do. I like to use it as an opportunity to educate a little bit too about, how those Bill of Rights actually do apply. Let me flip through some of these real quick. So we have.
Sorry about the F-bomb. It's hard to say Trump without the F-bomb. To be more fair. Sorry.
You're all right.
I'll back.
No worries. So these are just some of the posts. So we have Senator Ben Albritton. We're enduring a global pandemic, but that doesn't change the meaning of today. Christ arose from the grave and changed mankind forever. Today we rejoice in our Savior's resurrection. I pray that you have a safe and holy Easter, with a meme that says, praise be to God the Father, to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope. This is really hard to read. Whoever made this needs to learn about color contrast, because that's terrible. Anyway, it's 1 Peter 1:3 or something. So there's Ben Albritton. We have Kelly Stargell. Oh my God, all these notifications. You can go away.
But you also get to tell them, hey, you have an imaginary friend that advocates slavery. You don't get to lead anymore. That's kind of great that we can say that in public.
Right.
First Amendment. The other kind of goes both ways.
The other concern I have about this, though, is, and this is an argument that I made to the school board when we were having the conversation about allowing Christian prayers in graduations and handing out Gideon Bibles, which is, when you do this publicly, if you take the constitutionality aside, you're also, and this I think may cap your point. You're also sending a message, maybe inadvertently, maybe unintentionally, but you're sending a message that if you're not like me, if you're not Christian, then I'm not going to represent you equally, or that I don't see you as equal to me, that I see you as less than. It makes people who do not share your beliefs feel like second-class citizens.
But what we're talking about is who should regulate that act, right? And I'm saying the voters should. And sure. I think that the voters, changing the hearts and minds of the voters, that should affect our elected officials more than the government. Because if we tell people, hey, don't be religious in public, it's also violating their First Amendment rights to a degree. They don't get to be who they are because they have a job. I've always disagreed with that. Although I got to tell you, man, if I had to work next to a guy in a cubicle who was a white supremacist who always went on and on and on about how terrible black people are, I'd want to choke that dude out like that. There's only so much of that stuff you can take, but why shouldn't you get to be who you are at work? And that, I think that includes our public officials. I'm an unbearable prick, but I've got a lot of skills. I don't think I should never be allowed to work again because I have opinions.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Right. No, and there's a line between, being who you are, I guess, or, saying, hey, well, we saw this with, what's his name? Mayor Pete in the primaries, where he had come out and was like, look, I'm a Christian and this is my faith and whatever, but I think church and state should be separate, and I wouldn't, use my beliefs to do this, that, or the other. So being able to publicly be a believer or say, I believe in this stuff, I think is one thing. When we change to, I'm going to use my platform to promote my religion, maybe that's something else. Right.
That's the challenge. Is right now we can clearly see theocracy. We can see people who have a religion, right, who have an opinion about their beliefs. They are actively making rules based on their beliefs for the rest of us, and we can do nothing about it. And that is the frustrating thing. Is why doesn't the electorate rise up and say, you don't get to represent all of us, with your very particular view? It's because they also share that particular view.
Right.
I think the only way to have First Amendment rights, no matter where you are, whether you're at home, whether you're out in public, wherever you are, but also have leadership that's fair to everyone, is to make everyone more fair. I know that's the larger, harder battle, but I mean, that's what it boils down to, is going, hey, didn't your Jesus just create a virus that's killing the elderly and toddlers? If we have that conversation, then we quit having leadership that says, that gay people need to burn in hell. Terrible,
Well,
absolutely terrible, and it's based on their belief system. I think it's the belief system that we have to go after, though, not necessarily their ability to be themselves in public.
right. Well, you just mentioned something I think that's also important, and I'm going to try to find the comment here. But one person commented in one of these posts about, I think that the majority of people in so and so's district agree with this messaging and want to hear it.
Right.
Well, the Bill of Rights, the protections offered in our freedoms in the Constitution and in some subsequent laws were designed to protect the minority opinion from majority rule, right? We don't we don't do majority rule. That's the point, is that, so let's say there's 60% of the people in the county that are evangelical Christians. That doesn't mean that we legislate everything that way. That doesn't mean that, that's how that controls all the things. We're supposed to be representative.
Right. That's the challenge, is as soon as, and we found this out with Trump, and I'm not being partisan here when I say this, that we had rules. We really did. Yeah. We had rules against emoluments, against all these other things. Yep. And as soon as he stepped in and said, okay, well, now what? Then we found out how toothless a lot of those rules are. Sure. And the reason a lot of these guidelines become, paper tigers is because the people who are supposed to enforce this, the people who are voting, you and I, we ultimately enforce this stuff with our votes.
It's true.
We don't agree on right and wrong right now, which is really frustrating. Yeah. Should it be okay to legislate against someone's love? No, no, absolutely not. As long as they're not violating someone else's rights. If you're both consenting adults, we're done at that point. We need to step out, but we have to get the electorate to agree with it. If the entire electorate in a democracy, in a republic, if the entire mob believes that gay people should burn, then they make up the rules. They decide that gay people are harmed, by this legislation. I feel like that's why I feel like it's more important that we reach out to the people we know rather than to attack our elected officials at this point, verbally, by the way. So, government minders, never advocate violence. I absolutely don't. But we have to defend these minorities, these people in our groups who are us. We have to do that by changing the hearts and minds of the people around us. That seems to me the larger battle.
Yep. Let's look at a couple more of these just to see where our folks stand. So we mentioned Kelly Stargell. Though our gatherings may be small this year, let our faith in the Lord and our love for one another be overflowing. May this season remind us that even in times of doubt, there is hope. Wishing you and your family good health and joy this Easter. # He is risen. # Happy Easter. And we've got a He is risen thing. Let me see if I can find. Let me scroll through some comments here and see if I can find.
# He is Pillsbury.
So let's see. We get a lot of agreement. We're on most relevant. I hate Facebook, by the way, with its new most relevant as the automatic selection. Here's Representative Josie Tomkow. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a huge fish, so the Son of Man.
Sorry.
So the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Matthew 12:40.
Why can't we as an electorate go, man, you believe that? Like, should you really be making the rules if you believe that he wasn't digested,
right,
by that large?
Right. But so there's a good question. Is quoting scripture, does that cross the line of, proselytization or promoting one religion over another and that sort of thing?
Well, okay, so I'm going to double down here. I absolutely want to tell you, yes, you're right. But I
think there's value in both of these approaches. I really do. I think there's value in both of the places we're coming from.
If they're willing to say crazy shit, they need to be able to own it, just like I do. You know what I mean? Like, I say crazy shit, and I gotta answer to shit to people. Well, the reason I thought that was this. How about this? Let's give them the option to be wrong. Like, why do our leaders have to be right all the time? Yeah. Like, why can't they come back and say, you know what, guys, I'm sorry, I messed that up. There's no way that Jonah would have been able to breathe in that fish at all, and you can't go 3 days without air. Yeah,
right.
And then okay, well, you get to still be a leader because you're rational. Like I'm fine with that. If Josie Tom Cow comes back and says, that shit's crazy, I'm sorry, then I'd be like, oh, thanks, appreciate that. Now let's move forward with better data.
Mm-hmm. I think there's also a hypocrisy again too, where again, if one of these people were, quoting a surah, the Christians in the audience would be losing their ever-loving minds right now.
I agree.
Anyway. So this is Senator Tom Lee. Not too bad. Same graphic. Looks like we've been passing that around the circle. Wishing you a blessed Easter full of joy and peace. Okay, fine. Colleen Burton, though we may not be gathering with those we love this Easter together, we can all rejoice in our Savior's resurrection. Again, it's not too bad. There's a very non-religious graphic that she's used there with the Easter eggs. I wonder if she understands the history of the holiday. Anyway, and then this is the one that sort of surprised me, and I maybe this is the piece that brings me to your side, because this brings me to the opportunity to go in and say thank you. Very surprising to me, because I have followed all of these. I follow all of our legislators and see what they post, and particularly Christian holidays tend to be a time that they spark up. But Melanie Bell here, state representative for District 56, posts, Easter is tomorrow, and many are wondering how to celebrate. Here is a great resource about how to celebrate Easter while still maintaining social distancing measures, and shares an NBC link. And so there was a post prior to this on her page that was, here are the live stream church services that you can attend. And then this is a post that's like, here's how you can decorate Easter eggs and have a good time with your kids at the house because you can't go out and and do the community egg hunt or whatever it is, the thing that that you normally do. And so I took a moment to respond positively to that and to say thank you for including secular options, because we know that not just Christians celebrate this holiday for its religious purpose, but that also there is a non-religious celebration of this holiday too, in the same way that we celebrate Santa Claus and on Christmas time instead of the birth of baby Jesus. And so this is where I think I depart. If you're willing to touch all of those points, then fine, touch all of them. But if it's the one specific one, then that just angers me, and I have to at least respond. And I guess that's where you're right, that this gives me the opportunity to go in and say, hey, knock it off.
Well, and you can believe anything you want as long as you are willing to, if you represent the people, to put forth quality leadership that represents everyone.
Right.
And
yes.
That's a decision that you and I make, not them.
Yep.
Like if they get up there and start saying crazy shit, we need to decide someone else goes in.
Yep.
Which, I like peripherally know Melanie Bell. I've met her before, and I have a friend. I have a family member that's close friends with her. Full disclosure, and she's always been a decent human being to me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we don't agree on things, but I respect it that she did that. I wasn't aware that she did that, but I think that's really more representative of all the people instead of just a few people. So I respect that. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think the point the point that we're making but not making is vote. God, dear God, vote.
That's exactly it. We should have a say in what these people do. Not necessarily. I don't. That's why it's such a challenge for me, is to try to regulate. And I found this with, and I'm going to open up a can of worms here. Get your bat out. You can hit me if you want. Okay. But with the LGBTQ community, and I probably don't even have the letters right at this point. I think it's, what else is there? It's LGBTQ plus, or is it
there's
IA?
LGBTQIA, there's LGBTQIA+, I like GRSM or some variation of that, which is gender, romantic, and sexual minorities. That's kind of all encompassing. I've been teaching that. But anyway, go on.
I'm from the South. It's all queer. I'm just kidding. But that's so much easier to say, and I'm not mad at you. This is the thing where you may have to hit me with a bat. Is I feel like I'm an ally. Like I believe in that movement. I believe in those folks. But I feel like I'm a Christian who's trying to legislate the atheists. Like I'm like, I don't really understand what you're saying, but I'm kind of with you, but I believe in Jesus.
Right.
Like it feels kind of the same way, I guess, because I'm with you and I want to work with you and help in any way I can, but I don't fully understand the situation.
Right.
And so that's kind of how I can I don't know, on some level relate to that. I told you when we first met, I'm going to say the wrong thing. Absolutely. 100%. Right. I think I just did a minute ago, but, but I believe in you. I care about you and I want good things for you. And I feel like, maybe what Melanie Bell did was saying that same thing. And that's because she's authentically being who she is. Yes. She's a Christian who probably believes that Jonah was in a whale, but, she's also doing what's best for the group.
Yes.
So maybe she deserves to keep power. I don't know that thing with full disclosure, that thing with Billy Townsend, when she went after him, not a fan of that.
No, not at all.
Remove power from someone who did something like that, that Chinese democracy.
Yep.
But you're right. I mean, if we vote, if we start making these choices about who leads us and who speaks for us, as opposed to just following our religious instincts, our religious rules and dogma. That's why I keep feeling like if our vote matters, we have to change how people think when they vote. That's more important than the vote itself. It's more important than the elected leaders that we have. It's for us to decide that education's important, that facts matter, and then we vote.
Yeah.
So, just to the mission. We'll see how it goes.
This is the thing that Anthony Magnabosco talks about a lot when he's out doing the street epistemology. Which is the idea of, I want you to have good reasons to come to true belief, right? I want you to have good reasons for the things that you believe, because that informs all of the other things that you do. And if we can get you the tools to be critically minded and skeptical and think through things in a way that leads to conclusions that are more true, then that goes out into all of the other things that we do in our lives, and that can only be better things for all of us.
Yeah, 10 hours of critical thinking with my kids, it destroyed thousands of hours of indoctrination,
So let's jump then. Let me see. I think I got one more, maybe not. Nope, that was the last one, Melanie Bell. So let's jump then and talk real briefly then about parenting through religious holidays like this. So we kind of talked about, it's the Easter Bunny and he is risen, and then the Christmas you got the Santa Claus versus the baby Jesus is born, and there is a segment of the atheist community that will burn you at the stake for teaching your kid about Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny, because you're doing the same thing those Christians are. You're teaching them shit that ain't true, and you shouldn't do that. There is a definite segment of the atheist community that will do that. And I would like to make the case that we did it, and we weren't really like in the movement when we had our first child and started the whole Santa tradition thing. But there's a lot of that. I mean, I grew up religious, but we also did Santa, and there's a big part of me that there's a lot of reverie in that. There's a lot of feeling and emotion that comes back for me of family and togetherness and that sort of thing. Through the Christmas tree and the decorations and the Santa Claus and all of that stuff that's not religious. But also it offered us an opportunity to teach our kid a lesson about critical thinking and skepticism. One of these days, and this is the difference, one of these days he's going to come to us and say, I don't think that shit's real. And you know what we're going to say? You're right. It was us the whole time. But what's cool now is that you get to be a Santa Claus for somebody else, your little sister or your friends or whatever, now you get to take on that role. And the lesson here is about selflessness and giving and togetherness. And that's what Santa represents. It's not a dude that comes down your chimney. It's a metaphor. It's a representation of all of these good things that we want you to learn and take into your life. And now you get to go and do that for somebody else. And I think if you're out there and you're an atheist trying to figure out how do I do these holiday things, I think that's a good way to, sort of tie that lesson back into, yep, you thought it through. Neil deGrasse Tyson tells a great story about, I think it's his daughter. Yeah, that the tooth fairy. And she says, I don't think the tooth fairy is real. And Neil says, look, I've heard that this is a true thing that, but I don't really know. You put the thing into your pillow and then the tooth disappears and you get a coin and it's the tooth fairy. And then so she starts setting up these elaborate traps and tries to like think through it and then comes to the conclusion, this ain't true. This isn't real. Took a tooth, fell out at school and didn't tell anybody, didn't tell the adults, and came to the understanding this is all BS and came to it on her own. And I think there's a good way to tie all of this stuff into lessons of critical thinking and skepticism. I know. What do you do with your kids?
I have a perfectly skeptical approach, obviously, because I told my kid the truth. I said, there is no Santa Claus. I'm your father. I'm responsible for telling you the truth. Truth is there's no Santa. He says, well, I've seen him. And so then I falsified evidence of his existence. So yeah, I don't have it figured out either. In fact, on Easter, I just done a show about, I don't believe in any of this shit, but tomorrow there will be eggs in the yard. We're putting on the full armor of Easter. Ostara. So sure enough, I woke the kids up with, hey, baby Jesus crapped eggs in the yard. Go find them. The terrible thing about it is my kids, because, critical thinkers, whatnot, they went with the joke and started really running with it. I'm like, no, calm down. You're going to piss your mama. Be respectful. I know that was entirely disrespectful what I just did, but, don't do that. I can only speak from my perspective on this. I feel like, we can give them the tools and, we can have the conversations, but we also can't destroy tradition, and we don't really want to disrespect our fellow human beings too much, and that's what I'm finding out by, living with a Christian that I love dearly is that I don't want to hurt her feelings. I don't want to lie to my children, but also there's something magical, for lack of a better word, about having traditions, about having, things that we do every year to kind of mark the seasons and to mark the year. In fact, Christians stole Easter from pagans.
Yeah, that's what all of those are celebrations of seasonal change. Yeah.
Right. Because those things, I think that those things are more central to us than our explanations for death. Where we go when we die is an important question, but it's not as important as what we cook for this, solstice meal or something. You know what I mean? Like I look forward to that meal. I don't care much about heaven. And I've always felt that way as a kid. Maybe that's why I'm so chubby now. But, those traditions matter. They do. So balancing that, I think it's an individual choice. It's up to everybody. But I mean, on this really kind of innate ape type level, we're all apes, right? We need these community events. And I don't think we should move away from those, to be honest. I mean, I don't give a shit if we have Santa every year. I put up a tree every year, decorate it every year, have Christmas dinner every year. Thanksgiving, and the more you dig into Thanksgiving, the more horrific it is.
Oh yeah.
It should be called White Privilege Day or something, but it's having those traditions is going to be valuable. Having these communities like you and I, this community that you're building and that I'm trying to join for $10 a month. It's, I feel like those things are still vital. They're still central to who we are as upright apes. We need each other. And so for the good of the species, if we just do away with faith and we keep the turkey until which, by the way, we have to move away from meat. That's another thing that I don't want to do, but we have to,
Well, that's a thing. I think, then I think about people who have been harmed by a religion. There's a lot of that out there. And don't let us tell you what, a big part of the lesson that I want my kids to learn out of the Santa Claus thing is don't, question authority. Don't just, don't just take what anybody says as anybody that even your parents can be wrong. Like, that's what I want you to learn. You've spent your entire childhood trusting us implicitly, and we're going to keep you from burning your hand on the stove if we can, but we are wrong about stuff too. And so you can't just trust any authority with, that sort of implicit trust. And then that translates to how people, trust religion and religious leaders and their icons.
And politicians.
And politicians, yeah. And parties and all the way down the chain, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that's been so interesting to me lately, and I want to say horrific, but I'll go with interesting, is, at what point does a politician cross the line nowadays? At what point do we go, hey, no, you're done. get out. Is it murder? Is it rape on camera? Like where do we get to a point where we're like, hey, you're unreasonable to speak for the whole rest of us? Like it seems like we've pushed that line so far. I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I'm waiting to see people stand up and go, hey, this is unacceptable, but it doesn't seem like it's coming.
And that's crazy to me. Anyway, what I was going to say there in that moment, and I lost it and came back. Make up your own traditions, right? If you come from a religious background and it hurt you somehow, and to even think about it or to walk into a church would cause a emotional trigger, then don't do that stuff and come up with something else. Make up your own thing. Like, you don't have to do what the rest of us do. Give you a good example. A friend of mine who I believe she may still be a believer. She developed sepsis and was in a coma over Christmas one year. And so Christmas things are very triggering to her because of that experience. And we all work in the Disney bubble. And so Disney celebrates Christmas for like 4 months. So to work
I totally dig it, by the way.
Oh, I do too. But I love Christmas. It's not but for her, that can be a triggering thing. And so you got to come up with your own. On the flip of that, right? Becca, another one of our directors, and my wife, grew up a Jehovah's Witness, and so birthdays and Christmas were withheld from her. So we do Christmas way overboard because she missed it and didn't get to do that, and wants to do it, and wants to have those memories for our kids. And so we do go overboard with it. Do whatever makes you happy. This is, at the end of the day, as long as you're not hurting anybody else, do what makes you happy. I think that's the life lesson that we put on the T-shirt, because, there's no authority here telling you this is how you have to do it, this is how you should do it. But community is important, to your point, and to find a way to be together with your family and have traditions that are important and special to you is important. So do that.
Yeah, you and I agree on the sports balls, by the way, which I think is kind of fun. So I've kind of gotten into some sports peripherally, right? Like I got a buddy that's into wrestling. I'm like, I get it, and I'm not a fan, but you're my buddy, so we'll watch wrestling together. It's silly, but okay. I'm finding that is a language, like those traditions, sports. They're a language that give you access to a large group of our community. It's kind of the same as Christmas or Thanksgiving. Sports are also, they're a way that we collect and communicate. I hate to admit that, but it's true. Like if you don't speak football, you've lost 3/4 of Americans,
For sure.
I don't know. It's always a balance. Like, is this valuable enough for me to participate? Or, I don't know.
Yeah.
Tough thing. I feel like if I don't teach my kids football, then they won't be able to speak to the rest of the people in Florida.
So let's end it here with a couple of questions I'll put to the viewership. Write in, tell us what you think. You can send an email to info@polkatheists.org, and we'll check those out, and we can maybe talk about it on the next one. If you want to weigh in on any of the topics we talked about today, here are a couple prompts. How do you handle secular celebrations of religious holidays if you're a parent and you have kids or grandkids? How do you handle these religious holidays with your kids? And another one, where do you stand on these issues of government officials using their social media to send religious messages? Would you rather they post those messages if that's who they really are? Or would you rather them, keep their beliefs to themselves and rule evenly if they can? I think we touched on a whole bunch of different nuanced sort of positions you might fall into on a spectrum there. But info@polkatheists.org. We'd love to hear what you think. And about this or anything else, if you've got topic ideas for future shows, we'd love to hear that. We'd be happy to talk about anything that's going on. I do want to share some things that we're doing and some events that are happening. So there are volunteers of the ACPC who are right now making masks that will be delivered to people and places on the front line who need them. There are medical institutions and nursing homes and places of business that still have to operate because of their actual essential nature. the CDC has come out now and said, hey, you know what? We didn't really understand how this thing works beforehand, but now we understand it better. Everybody should probably be wearing a mask right now. And so nobody can get them. So they're asking for homemade mask donations. If you want to be a part of that, you can go to polkatheists.org. There's an article about, how to become part of this mask makers team. And basically you just, there's a pattern on the CDC website, and you whip out as many as you can. Let us know when you've got some to pick up. You can hang them on the doorknob, and we don't have to talk to each other. We don't have to come in contact. We'll just contactless pickup. And then tonight, I'm going to be presenting to the Humanists of Tallahassee in a remote conversation on Project Blitz, which many of you may have seen the presentation on, but if you haven't, check that out. The Project Blitz is the effort by the religious right to enshrine Christianity into state law. It's a state effort, and so I do a deep dive into their playbook and all of the things that they're trying to do. If you want to look up Humanists of Tallahassee on Facebook or check out our Facebook, I'll share the link to that as well. That's going to be an online deal tonight. And then the ACPC, we've been hosting online events. We've got a standing meetup, just kind of a general chat conversation, check in. How's everybody doing? Do you need anything? What's going on in your life right now? How's schooling your kids? How's that? Because that's some crazy stuff. But also, we didn't talk about this beforehand, but Miles is the gamer dude too. So I think it would be fun. I have every intention on picking up some games, like Drawful and maybe some stuff like that we can get together a group and do some online gaming. Maybe we'll get that going this week too. I think that'd be a lot of fun. I love Drawful. I just happen to, that's one of my favorites, but I know that I can't think of the name of that website. But they have a whole bunch of different games that are fun for small groups of people to get together and play. So maybe we'll do some of that. At any rate, we're trying to, keep the community going and keep in touch with each other. And interestingly, and maybe we can leave this conversation to end the show, is that I think this has opened the door for this having to go online thing, has opened the door for more people to get involved and put their voice and their face out to the rest of us, where we spent so much of our focus in the first year was this is not about an online thing. This isn't about being, assholes on Facebook in the comment section of the Ledger. This is about people getting together in community. And we saw that as a very in-person thing. And I think what we're learning through this, coronavirus pandemic time is that maybe we need to diversify that portfolio a little bit. And when things do go back to whatever the new normal is, we need to keep an online component of that going so that we do reach more people. So you ready to game? Let's do some gaming.
Yeah, what was that? Drawful, you said?
Drawful, yeah. Yeah, let me see.
Yeah. I'm still stuck on assholes on Facebook. It's like, well, you don't want to be Facebook on Assbook either.
Is
there an Assbook?
Jackbox.tv is the
okay.
Jackbox games. Yeah. But
so on Steam, by the way, and I keep,
these are on Steam too, right? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There are a few. There's Catan, and there's maybe that's a donation that I'll make to the group. I'll buy the copies for a few people. There's Catan, there's Small World, there's several board games that you can play remotely through Steam. That might be something we could look into too.
Yeah,
I know like some of the controller stuff isn't up everybody's alley, but maybe the board game stuff will be more.
What I like about these are sort of like there's some that are like Apples to Apples, or what's the other one, Cards Against Humanity. There's some that are kind of like that. But what I dig about these is like, we buy them. We buy the copy, the host copy, and then you just send out a code, and people can join the game with the code and play along or be part of the audience, and that's kind of cool too. So there's definitely a lot of stuff we can get together and do, and so I think we should maybe you and I can offline that afterwards, and we'll figure out some things to do.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Cool. Well, let's wrap it up there. Miles, thank you for jumping on here and doing this with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, anytime, my friend, anytime. And Heather could not be with us. Heather was going to join us and unfortunately had some other things going on. So hope maybe we'll get her in on the next one. But I do want to wrap it up here. we'll try to keep in contact. I want to keep doing these things more regularly now that I have some free time. Maybe we can at least once a week. The goal of Freethought in Florida has always been to get us to the point where we're doing a show on a regular basis. And so now I've got folks like Miles and there are some other people in the hopper who want to come on and be co-hosts with me. And so maybe we can get that going and get it done. But that's going to do it for this week, for today on Freethought in Florida. Check out polkatheists.org if you want to learn more about us and what we do and get connected with all of our events and stuff on Facebook and Meetup. And we'll see you next time.